The morning light filtered through the kitchen window in pale yellow streaks, casting shadows across the granite countertop where I'd left my phone. The device buzzed for the third time, vibrating against the cold stone with an insistent hum that made my chest tighten. I could see the name on the screen even from where I stood near the refrigerator, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the handle of the coffee pot. Mercy General Hospital. The coffee smelled bitter and burnt, like I'd left it on the warming plate too long, and the acrid scent mixed with the faint perfume that still lingered in the air, something floral and cloying that wasn't mine. "Are you going to get that?" David asked from the doorway, his voice carrying that edge of impatience I'd grown accustomed to over the past 6 months. He was already dressed, wearing the navy polo shirt I'd bought him for his birthday, the one that brought out the blue in his eyes. Those same eyes that used to look at me with warmth now held nothing but irritation. I watched him check his watch, a nervous gesture he'd developed lately. The metal band caught the morning light, sending tiny reflections dancing across the wall. My throat felt tight, like someone had wrapped their hands around it and squeezed. "It's the hospital," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. The words seemed to evaporate in the space between us. He sighed, the sound heavy with exasperation, and ran his fingers through his salt and pepper hair. I could smell his cologne from across the room, something expensive and woody that she had probably picked out for him. "Claire, not this again. You don't need to go to that appointment today. You're always exaggerating these things. It's probably just routine blood work or something they can reschedule." The phone stopped buzzing. The silence that followed felt thick, oppressive, like the air before a thunderstorm. I set the coffee pot down, my hands shaking enough that the glass clinked against the counter. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet kitchen. "David, it's my chemotherapy. It's supposed to start today. We've been planning this for weeks." "Chemotherapy," he repeated, and I heard the skepticism dripping from every syllable. He crossed his arms over his chest, leaning against the doorframe with a casualness that made my stomach churn. "You've been to a dozen doctors, had 100 tests, and you always think something's wrong. Remember last year when you were convinced you had a heart condition? It was anxiety, Claire. Just anxiety." The memory hit me like a physical blow, making my knees weak. I gripped the counter edge, feeling the sharp corner dig into my palm. Yes, last year I had been wrong. The chest pains had been panic attacks, the shortness of breath had been stress. But this was different. This was real. I had the biopsy results, the scans, the consultation notes. Stage 2 breast cancer, they'd said, sitting in that sterile office that smelled of antiseptic and artificial air freshener. Treatable, but aggressive. They'd used that word several times, aggressive, and each time it felt like a punch to the gut. "This isn't like that," I said, hearing the pleading note creep into my voice and hating myself for it. "Dr. Morrison confirmed it. I have the pathology reports. I showed them to you. You showed me a bunch of papers with medical jargon that could mean anything." He pushed off from the doorframe and walked to the coffee maker, pouring himself a cup with steady hands. Steam rose from the dark liquid, curling in the air like ghosts. "Look, I have plans today. Important plans. You can reschedule the appointment. These places are always flexible." My phone buzzed again, the 4th call. My fingers itched to answer it, but I couldn't seem to make myself move. The morning sun had shifted, now hitting the vase of flowers on the windowsill, the ones I'd bought myself last week because David had forgotten our anniversary. The petals were starting to brown at the edges, curling inward like they were trying to protect themselves. "What plans?" I asked, though I already knew. I could smell it on him. That perfume that wasn't mine. I could see it in the way he couldn't meet my eyes, in the way his jaw tightened when I spoke. "Just errands," he said quickly, too quickly. He took a sip of his coffee, and I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed. "Shopping, some things I need to pick up." The doorbell rang, a cheerful chime that felt grotesque in the tension of the moment. My heart began to pound, a heavy thudding rhythm that I could feel in my temples. David's face brightened immediately, transforming from irritated to almost boyish in its eagerness. He set down his coffee mug with a decisive click and headed for the front door, his footsteps quick on the hardwood floor. I followed him, my bare feet cold against the wood, feeling each groove and imperfection in the boards beneath my soles. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could see a silhouette, feminine and small. My stomach dropped, that sensation of free-falling that makes your whole body go rigid with dread. David opened the door, and there she was, Melissa. She was younger than me by at least 15 years. probably in her late 20s, with honey blonde hair that caught the sunlight and skin that glowed with the kind of health and vitality I'd lost somewhere along the way. She wore a sundress, pale yellow with white flowers, and wedge sandals that made her legs look impossibly long. Her perfume wafted in with the morning breeze, that same floral scent that had been haunting my house for months. "Ready to go?" she asked David, her voice bright and musical. Then her eyes slid to me, and I saw the calculation there, the barely concealed triumph. "Oh, hi, Claire. I didn't know you'd be up. It's my house," I wanted to scream. "I live here." Instead, I managed a tight smile, my face feeling like it might crack from the effort. "Good morning, Melissa." David had the decency to look uncomfortable for about half a second before he recovered. "Melissa's helping me with some shopping today. She has better taste than I do." He laughed, the sound hollow and forced. My phone was buzzing again in the kitchen. I could hear it even from the foyer, that persistent vibration that seemed to echo through my bones. Fifth call. Nurse Patterson was probably frantic by now. They'd scheduled my port placement for 8:30, the first chemotherapy infusion for 9. There was paperwork to sign, pre-medications to administer, a whole protocol that had been explained to me in careful detail by the oncology nurse with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "I need to take that call," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The walls of the foyer seemed to be closing in, the air growing thinner. "It can wait," David said dismissively, grabbing his keys from the bowl on the hall table. The keys jangled, a bright metallic sound that set my teeth on edge. "We're running late as it is." "Actually," Melissa interjected, stepping further into my house with a confidence that made my blood boil. "We should get going. The mall gets so crowded after 10. I watched them move toward the door, watched David's hand hover near the small of her back without quite touching, watched her smile up at him with those perfect white teeth. Something inside me snapped, then reformed into something cold and hard. "Have a good time," I said, and my voice sounded strange even to my own ears, too calm, too flat. David paused, looking back at me with suspicion flickering across his face. "You're not going to make a scene about this appointment thing?" he asked. I shook my head slowly, feeling my hair brush against my shoulders. I'd lost some weight in recent weeks, enough that my clothes hung loose, enough that my wedding ring spun freely on my finger. No scene. You're right. I probably am exaggerating. I'll call them back and reschedule." Relief flooded his features, and he actually smiled at me. That old, familiar smile that once made my heart flutter. Now it just made me feel hollow. "That's my girl. See? You're being reasonable. We'll talk when I get back tonight, okay?" "Okay," I agreed, and I meant it in ways he couldn't possibly understand. They left, and I watched through the front window as they walked to his car. My car, technically. The silver BMW SUV we'd bought together 3 years ago. Melissa climbed into the passenger seat, my seat, adjusting the mirror and settling in like she belonged there. David backed out of the driveway, and I stood there until the car disappeared around the corner, until the sound of the engine faded into the ambient noise of the suburban morning. The house felt different in their absence, both emptier and somehow fuller, like I could finally breathe without the weight of their presence pressing down on me. I walked back to the kitchen, my feet making soft padding sounds on the floor, and picked up my phone. 6 missed calls now. The screen was smudged with my fingerprints, and I rubbed it absently against my shirt before calling back. "Mrs. Patterson speaking, oncology department," the voice on the other end said, warm but strained with worry. "Hi, Nancy. It's Claire Donovan. I'm so sorry I missed your calls." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Oh, Claire, thank goodness. We were getting worried. Are you on your way? Dr. Morrison wanted me to make sure you understood how important it is not to delay treatment." I closed my eyes, feeling the tears prick at the back of my eyelids. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and that lingering perfume, and suddenly I couldn't stand it anymore. "Nancy, I need to cancel today's appointment. Something came up." The silence on the other end stretched for several heartbeats. I could hear papers rustling, the distant beep of hospital equipment, someone's muffled voice calling for assistance in the background. "Claire, are you sure? Dr. Morrison was very clear about the treatment timeline. The cancer is aggressive, and every week we wait increases the risk of progression." "I understand," I said, and I did. I understood everything with a clarity that felt almost surreal. "But I need to cancel. I'll call back to reschedule. Soon, I promise." "Claire," Nancy's voice dropped lower, more intimate, the voice of someone who'd walked this path with countless patients. "Is everything okay? Is someone preventing you from coming in? Because if you need help, if you need us to send someone..." "I'm fine," I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. Really, it's my choice. I just need a little more time to process everything. We ended the call after she made me promise, twice, that I would reschedule within the week. I set the phone down and stood in the kitchen, in the shaft of sunlight that had now moved to illuminate the sink full of dishes from last night's dinner that David had barely touched before claiming he had work emails to answer. The light caught the water droplets on the faucet, making them sparkle like diamonds. I should have felt devastated. I should have been crying, breaking down, calling my sister or my mother or someone. Instead, I felt remarkably calm, like I was watching myself from a distance, observing the scene with detached curiosity. Maybe this was shock, maybe this was acceptance, or maybe this was something else entirely, something that had been building in me for months as I watched my marriage dissolve while my body betrayed me. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawnmower from several houses down. I walked through the rooms like I was seeing them for the first time, running my fingers along the back of the leather couch that David had insisted on buying, touching the spines of books on the shelves that no one ever read, straightening a picture frame that held a photo from happier times. We were on vacation in that picture, somewhere tropical with white sand beaches and turquoise water. I could barely remember that version of us, could barely recognize the woman in the photo, with the wide smile and sun-kissed skin. My laptop was on the dining room table where I'd left it the night before, surrounded by medical papers and insurance documents. I'd been trying to understand my coverage, to figure out what portion of the treatment costs we'd be responsible for. The numbers had made my head spin, 6 figures dancing across the page in neat columns. But we had good insurance, David always said. He worked for a large tech company with excellent benefits. We could afford this. We could survive this. Except he didn't believe I needed it. Except he thought I was exaggerating, being dramatic, seeking attention. The words he'd thrown at me during our last real fight echoed in my mind. You're always sick with something, Claire. Always running to some doctor or another. Maybe if you took better care of yourself, exercised more, stressed less, you wouldn't be falling apart. I opened my laptop and started searching, my fingers moving across the keyboard with purpose. Dr. Rachel Morrison, oncologist. Her practice website came up first, professional and clean with testimonials from grateful patients. Then her personal information, carefully curated but available if you knew where to look. Medical school at Johns Hopkins, residency at Memorial Sloan Kettering, board certified in medical oncology and hematology. She'd been practicing for 15 years, had published papers on breast cancer treatment protocols, had won awards for patient care. And then I found it, buried in the 3rd page of search results, an article from a local medical journal about physicians who volunteered their time at community health fairs. There was Dr. Morrison, smiling beside another familiar face. Dr. James Donovan, family medicine. David's father. They'd done their residencies together, stayed friends over the decades, often referred patients back and forth. Dr. Morrison had been the one to suggest I see her when my primary care physician found the lump during a routine exam. She's the best, he'd said, and she knows the family. At the time, it had seemed like a blessing. Now, I saw it for what it was, an opportunity. I made myself a fresh pot of coffee, this time being careful not to burn it, and sat down with my laptop and my medical files. The cancer diagnosis was real, devastatingly real. The pathology report lay in front of me, full of words that had become horribly familiar. Invasive ductal carcinoma, estrogen receptor positive, HER2 negative, grade 2. The tumor was 2.3 centimeters, small enough to be treatable, but large enough to require aggressive therapy. Chemotherapy first to shrink it, then surgery, then radiation, then years of hormone therapy. The treatment plan was printed on crisp white paper with Dr. Morrison's signature at the bottom. 6 cycles of TC chemotherapy, docetaxel and cyclophosphamide, administered every 3 weeks. The side effects were listed in clinical detail: nausea, fatigue, hair loss, increased infection risk, neuropathy, cognitive changes. The nurse had gone over everything with me twice, making sure I understood what I was facing, making sure I had support at home. Your husband will need to be involved, she'd said, looking at David, who'd come to exactly 1 appointment, the initial consultation, and spent most of it checking his phone. Claire will need help on chemotherapy days, especially the first few cycles. She'll be weak, possibly quite sick. She can't drive herself home. She'll need someone to monitor for fever or severe reactions. Of course, David had said, not looking up from his screen. I'll be there. But he wasn't. He was shopping with Melissa, his assistant, his friend, his lover. The woman who'd started working for his company 8 months ago, right around the time David started working late, started going to the gym more, started buying new clothes and cologne. The woman who'd somehow become indispensable to him while I'd become invisible. I pulled up my email and composed a message to Dr. Morrison's office, my fingers hovering over the keys before typing. The words came easily, professionally, almost detached. I explained that I needed to postpone treatment for a few weeks, that I had some personal matters to resolve first, that I understood the risks but felt I needed this time. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came within an hour. Doctor. Morrison wanted to see me for a consultation, wanted to discuss my decision, wanted to make sure I understood the implications of delay. We scheduled for the following Tuesday, late afternoon. That gave me almost a week. A week for David to go on his planned vacation with Melissa, something I discovered by accident when his calendar notification had popped up on our shared iPad. 5 days in Napa Valley, wine tasting and fine dining and romance that should have been mine. I spent the rest of that day doing oddly normal things. I cleaned the house, scrubbing the kitchen counters until they gleamed, vacuuming the carpets in precise rows, washing the windows until the glass was perfectly clear. The physical activity felt good, made my muscles ache in a way that was honest and real. I made myself lunch, a salad with grilled chicken that I forced myself to eat even though nothing tasted right anymore. Everything bland and cardboard-like. David came home late, after 8, smelling of wine and expensive restaurant food and that perfume. He was in good spirits, almost cheerful, and I wondered if he'd forgotten about the canceled appointment entirely, or if he'd simply decided it wasn't worth thinking about. "How was your day?" he asked, loosening his tie as he headed for the stairs. "Fine," I said from the kitchen where I was washing dishes. "Quiet. Good. That's good. I'm beat. Going to take a shower and crash." He paused on the landing, looking back at me with something that might have been guilt or might have been indigestion. "You feeling okay? You look tired." "I'm fine," I repeated, and it was almost funny how easily the lie came now. "Just fine." He disappeared upstairs, and I heard the water running, heard him singing off-key in the shower like he used to do when we were first married. I dried the last dish and put it away, wiping down the counters one more time before turning off the lights. In the darkness, the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended animation. David worked late, came home briefly, was always on his phone. I went to my own job at the library, shelving books and helping patrons and pretending that everything was normal. My coworkers knew I was supposed to start treatment, had thrown me a small party with cards and promises to visit during recovery. I told them the appointment had been rescheduled, some insurance issue, nothing to worry about. Their sympathetic faces made my chest tight, but I smiled and thanked them and went back to work. I found myself touching things more deliberately, noticing textures I'd overlooked before. The smooth, cool surface of book covers, the rough weave of the carpet under my desk, the soft, worn cotton of my favorite sweater. Colors seemed brighter somehow, more intense. The autumn leaves outside the library windows were impossibly vivid, reds and golds that hurt to look at. Or maybe I was just paying attention for the first time in years. On Thursday evening, David made his announcement over dinner. Chinese takeout eaten at the kitchen table from containers, because neither of us had bothered to get plates. "So, I need to go out of town for a few days. Work thing. Conference in Napa, some team-building exercises. I'll be leaving Saturday morning, back Thursday afternoon." I pushed a piece of broccoli around in the container, watching the brown sauce pool at the bottom. "Napa's nice this time of year." "Yeah, should be good. Sorry for the short notice." He wasn't sorry. His voice had that barely suppressed excitement, like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. "It's fine," I said, setting down my chopsticks. My appetite had vanished entirely, and the smell of the food was making me nauseous. "I'll manage." He looked relieved, almost grateful. "You're the best, Claire. Really. I know I've been distracted lately with work stress and everything. When I get back, we'll have a nice dinner, just the two of us. Maybe that Italian place you like. The one he'd taken Melissa to last week. I'd seen the charge on our joint credit card, 2 dinners, a bottle of wine that cost more than our weekly grocery bill. "That sounds nice," I said, and watched him relax further. Watched him believe that everything was fine, that I suspected nothing, that life would continue exactly as he'd arranged it. Saturday morning arrived cold and overcast, the kind of day that promised rain but never quite delivered. I made David breakfast, eggs and toast and coffee, playing the role of dutiful wife one more time. He ate quickly, distracted, checking his phone every few minutes. His suitcase sat by the door, packed with the new clothes he'd bought, the expensive toiletries, the silk ties, and designer sunglasses. "You have everything?" I asked, and he nodded, already moving toward the door. Yeah, I'll call you when I get there." He paused, seemed to remember something, and crossed back to kiss my forehead. His lips were dry, the gesture perfunctory and cold. "Take care of yourself, okay? Maybe rest, relax. You've been looking tired." "I will," I promised, and it wasn't a lie. I would take care of myself in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. He left, and I watched from the window as he drove away, probably to pick up Melissa, probably already thinking about the week ahead, and not at all about the wife he'd left behind. The house settled around me, silent and waiting. I had almost a week before my appointment with Dr. Morrison. A week before David returned, sunburned and satisfied and completely unaware that the life he'd carefully constructed was about to collapse around him. Because what David didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that Dr. Morrison wasn't just my oncologist. She was his father's oldest friend, a woman who'd known the Donovan family for decades, who'd been to their holiday parties and summer barbecues, who'd watched David grow from a boy to a man. And Dr. Morrison had very strong feelings about family loyalty, about marriage vows, about men who abandoned their wives during medical crises. I'd seen it in her eyes during that first consultation, when David had been so dismissive, so casual about my diagnosis. I'd seen her jaw tighten, seen her fingers grip the pen just a little harder as she wrote notes in my chart. Later, when David had stepped out to take a phone call that was apparently more important than hearing about his wife's cancer treatment, Dr. Morrison had looked at me with something like pity and something like anger. "Claire," she'd said carefully, "I want you to know that you don't have to go through this alone. There are support groups, counselors, resources available. And if you ever need anything at all, my door is always open." I'd thanked her, had smiled and nodded, and pretended not to notice the concern in her voice. But I'd understood what she wasn't saying, had heard the implied question. "Are you okay? Is he taking care of you? Should I be worried?" Now, standing in my empty house with rain finally starting to tap against the windows, I understood something else too. Dr. Morrison was also David's father's doctor, had been for years. Dr. A. James Donovan still practiced family medicine, still saw patients despite being in his late 60s, and he still went for his annual physical every October, a faithful patient who believed in preventive care and regular checkups. His appointment was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The same Tuesday, I was supposed to meet with Dr. Morrison about postponing my treatment. I knew this because David's mother had mentioned it last month during our monthly lunch date, back when she still thought I was part of the family, back before David had started pulling away and making excuses for why we couldn't see his parents. "Jim has his annual checkup next month," she'd said over salad and iced tea. "Dr. Morrison always does such a thorough job. We're so lucky to have her as our doctor." I'd agreed, had made small talk, had pushed down the bitterness that threatened to rise in my throat. Lucky. Yes, we were all so very lucky. The rain picked up, drumming against the roof now, and I moved through the house, turning on lights against the gathering gloom. In the study, I sat down at David's desk, something I rarely did, and looked at the space he'd made his own. Golf trophies on the shelf, his college diploma on the wall, a photograph of him with his parents at his brother's wedding. Notably absent were any pictures of us together, any evidence that he had a wife who loved him, who'd supported him through job changes and family dramas and all the small crises of adult life. I opened the desk drawer, not really looking for anything specific, just needing to do something with my hands. Inside were the usual things, pens and paper clips and old business cards. But there, tucked in the back, was a small velvet box that made my heart stop. I pulled it out with shaking hands and opened it. A diamond ring sparkled inside, delicate and beautiful, nothing like the engagement ring David had given me 20 years ago. This was modern, expensive, thoughtful. This was chosen with care and attention. This was meant for someone who mattered. I stared at the ring for what felt like hours, watching the diamond catch the lamplight and throw tiny rainbows across the desk surface. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside and left only a shell. The velvet box was soft against my fingertips, the kind of quality that spoke of money spent, of intention and planning. David had been planning this, planning a future that didn't include me, planning to ask her to marry him while I was sick, while I was dying maybe, while I fought for my life in sterile hospital rooms with poison dripping into my veins. The rain was coming down harder now, sheets of water obscuring the windows, and I could hear the wind picking up, making the old oak tree in the backyard groan and creak. I closed the box with a soft click and placed it back exactly where I'd found it, making sure everything looked undisturbed. My hands were steadier than I expected them to be. Maybe shock had its advantages. Maybe this numbness was a gift, protecting me from feeling too much all at once. I went upstairs to our bedroom, the room that smelled faintly of his cologne and that other perfume, layers of scent that told a story I'd been refusing to read. The bed was neatly made because I'd made it that morning, smoothing the duvet and arranging the pillows just so. Habits from 20 years of marriage that persisted even when the marriage itself was disintegrating. I opened David's closet and looked at his clothes hanging in neat rows, organized by color and season, and wondered who I'd been doing all this for. The wife who ironed his shirts, who picked up his dry cleaning, who made sure he had matching socks. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone I'd outgrown without noticing. In the back of the closet, hidden behind winter coats we rarely needed in California, I found a shopping bag from an expensive boutique downtown. Inside were more gifts, things David had bought but not yet given. A silk scarf in midnight blue, a perfume I didn't recognize, a leather journal with her initials embossed on the cover, M.R. Melissa Rodriguez. Even her initials sounded young and fresh and full of possibility. I left everything where it was and went back downstairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty house. The library where I worked had given me the next 2 weeks off, thinking I'd be starting chemotherapy, thinking I'd need time to recover. Instead, I had time to think, time to plan, time to understand exactly what my life had become and what I wanted it to be. That night, I slept surprisingly well, dreamless and deep, and woke to Sunday morning sunshine that seemed incongruous with the storm that had raged the night before. The world looked washed clean, the streets still wet and gleaming, the air fresh and cool through the open bedroom window. I made myself breakfast, actual breakfast with scrambled eggs and toast and orange juice, and ate it slowly at the kitchen table while reading the newspaper. The simple act of nourishing myself felt revolutionary, like I was claiming something back. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Arrived safely. Beautiful drive. How are you? I typed back, good. Enjoy your trip. 3 words that revealed nothing and everything. He sent back a smiley face emoji, and I set the phone aside, feeling nothing. The emotional blankness was almost frightening in its completeness. I'd spent months crying myself to sleep, months agonizing over every sign of his infidelity, months trying to be prettier, thinner, more interesting, more worthy of his attention. And now, with a cancer diagnosis hanging over my head and a ring hidden in his desk drawer, I felt nothing but a strange, cold clarity. I spent Sunday organizing my medical files, creating a timeline of every appointment, every test result, every conversation with doctors and nurses. I documented everything in a spreadsheet with the kind of meticulous attention I usually reserved for the library's cataloging system. Dates, times, costs, treatment plans, prognosis reports. The cancer was real. The pathology was unequivocal. There was no room for doubt, no space for David's claims that I was exaggerating. On Monday morning, I called Dr. Morrison's office and spoke with Nancy again. Her voice was warm but concerned, and I could hear the worry underneath her professional demeanor. Claire, I'm glad you called. Dr. Morrison really wants to see you tomorrow. She's very worried about the delay in treatment. I'll be there, I promised. 4 o'clock, right? Yes. And Claire, is there anything else you need to tell me? Anything at all? I paused, considering. Nancy had been nothing but kind to me, had held my hand through the worst news of my life, had explained things with patience when I couldn't seem to process the words. Nancy, Dr. Morrison is also Dr. Donovan's physician, right? David's father? There was a brief silence, the sound of papers being shuffled. Yes, she's been treating Dr. Donovan Sr. for years. Why do you ask? Just curious. I know they're old friends. I kept my voice light, casual, like it didn't matter. Like I wasn't building toward something. They are indeed. Listen, Claire, I need to be honest with you. Dr. Morrison mentioned that she had some concerns after meeting your husband. She wanted me to check in with you, make sure you have adequate support at home. If you need us to connect you with social services or counseling, that's very kind, I interrupted gently. But I'm managing, really. I'll see you tomorrow at 4. After we hung up, I sat with my coffee cooling in front of me and thought about Dr. Morrison's concerns. She'd seen what I'd been too close to see clearly. She'd recognized the signs of a man checking out, a marriage failing, a woman facing a medical crisis alone, and she'd cared enough to notice, to worry, to want to help. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of mundane tasks. I went grocery shopping, did laundry, returned library books, all the ordinary routines of life continuing despite everything. In the produce section of the grocery store, I found myself standing in front of the apples, my hand hovering over the Granny Smiths, when I heard someone call my name. Claire? Claire Donovan? I turned to find Patricia Donovan, David's mother, pushing a shopping cart toward me. She looked elegant as always, her silver hair perfectly styled, her linen pantsuit crisp despite the warmth of the afternoon. But her smile faltered when she got close enough to really see me, and I watched concern bloom across her features. "Oh, honey, you look so thin. Are you feeling all right?" She reached out and squeezed my arm, her touch gentle but searching, as if trying to assess my health through her fingertips. "I'm fine, Patricia. Just been a bit under the weather." The lie came automatically, smoothly, and I hated how easy it had become. "David mentioned you've been seeing doctors. Nothing serious, I hope?" Her eyes searched my face, and I saw the question there, the maternal worry that couldn't be completely hidden. For a moment, I was tempted to tell her everything, to unload the burden of my diagnosis, to cry on her shoulder, to ask her how her son had become the kind of man who abandoned his wife during chemotherapy. But what would that accomplish? Patricia loved her son. She'd make excuses for him, or worse, she'd confront him and he'd spin it somehow, make me the villain, the hysterical woman who couldn't handle a little stress. "Nothing serious," I said, and watched relief wash over her face. "Just routine checkups. You know how doctors are, always wanting to run tests." She nodded, accepting this explanation with visible relief. "Well, you make sure David is taking good care of you. That boy works too much, always has. But family comes first, I've told him that since he was little." She paused, then added, "We haven't seen you both in a while. When David gets back from his conference, why don't you come for dinner? I'll make your favorite, that chicken piccata you love." "That sounds wonderful," I said, knowing we'd never go, knowing that by the time David got back, everything would be different. "I'll check with David about his schedule." We chatted for a few more minutes about inconsequential things, her garden, her bridge club, the new restaurant that had opened downtown. Then she squeezed my arm again and moved on, her cart full of healthy foods and expensive wines, and I was left standing by the apples with my chest tight and my eyes burning. Patricia was a good woman. She didn't deserve what was coming, but neither did I, and I'd learned that the universe wasn't particularly concerned with what any of us deserved. That evening, I got a call from my sister Jennifer, who lived 3 hours north in Sacramento. We'd always been close, talking at least once a week, but I'd been avoiding her calls since the diagnosis. She knew something was wrong, but I'd been vague, telling her it was just some tests, nothing to worry about. Now her voice came through the phone, sharp with concern and barely suppressed frustration. "Claire, I swear to God, if you don't tell me what's going on right now, I'm getting in the car and driving down there." She'd never been one for subtlety, my little sister. "I talked to Mom, and she said you've been weird on the phone with her too. What's happening? Is it David? Did he do something?" I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the living room floor, and I could hear the neighbor's dog barking in the distance. "Jen, it's complicated." "Complicated how?" "Claire, you're scaring me. Just tell me." So I did. I told her about the lump, about the biopsy, about the diagnosis and the treatment plan. I told her about David canceling my chemotherapy appointment, about Melissa, about the ring in the desk drawer. The words came out flat and emotionless, like I was reading a grocery list, and I heard her breathing change on the other end of the line, heard her rage building. "That motherfucker!" she spat, and I could picture her pacing her kitchen, her face flushed with anger. "That absolute piece of shit! I'm coming down there. Tonight. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to actually murder him. Jen, he's not even here. He's in Napa with her." The silence that followed was thick with fury. "While you have cancer. He's on vacation with his mistress while you have cancer." "Yes. And you're postponing chemotherapy because why, exactly? To accommodate his affair? Claire, what the hell?" I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of tears for the first time since Saturday. "I don't know. I just needed time to think, to figure out what I want. What you want is to divorce that asshole and take him for everything he's worth. And what you need is to start your treatment immediately. Claire, you can't play around with cancer. It's not like..." Her voice broke, and I heard her take a shaky breath. You can't postpone treatment because David's too busy fucking his secretary to drive you to the hospital. She's not his secretary. She's a project manager or something. I don't care if she's the Queen of England. This is not okay. None of this is okay. Jen's voice was fierce now, protective. I'm coming down this weekend. You can't stop me. And we're going to figure this out together. Okay, I said quietly, and felt something loosen in my chest. Okay, Jen. Thank you. We talked for another hour, my sister making plans with the kind of determined energy I'd lost somewhere along the way. She'd take Friday off work, drive down Thursday night, stay for a week if needed. She'd go to my rescheduled chemotherapy appointment with me when I made it. She'd help me find a divorce attorney. She'd kick David's ass if he so much as looked at me wrong. And Mom cannot know about this yet, Jen said firmly. She'll have a complete breakdown, and you don't need that stress right now. We'll tell her once you're stable, once treatment is underway and David is served with divorce papers. Our mother was fragile on the best of days, prone to anxiety and dramatic reactions. The thought of managing her emotional response to my cancer while dealing with everything else was exhausting. Agreed. Mom finds out later. After we hung up, I felt lighter somehow, like sharing the burden had made it more bearable. The house didn't feel quite so empty. The silence didn't feel quite so oppressive. I made myself dinner, pasta with marinara sauce from a jar, and ate it while watching mindless television, letting the sounds and colors wash over me without really absorbing anything. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that made everything seem possible. I dressed carefully for my appointment with Dr. Morrison, choosing clothes that fit well, that didn't make me look as thin and worn as I felt. I did my makeup for the first time in days, covering the dark circles under my eyes, adding color to my cheeks. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who looked reasonably put together, reasonably healthy. No one would guess that inside I was falling apart. The drive to Dr. Morrison's office took 20 minutes through familiar streets, past the coffee shop where David and I used to meet for breakfast on Saturdays, past the park where we'd gotten engaged under the oak trees. The memories felt distant now, like they belonged to different people. Maybe they did. The medical building was modern and clean, all glass and steel and soft gray carpeting. I rode the elevator to the third floor, my stomach churning with nerves, and checked in with the receptionist who greeted me by name. The waiting room was empty except for an older man reading a magazine, and I took a seat near the window, watching people come and go in the parking lot below. Claire? Nancy appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up when she saw me. Come on back, honey. Dr. Morrison is ready for you. I followed her through the corridor to Dr. Morrison's consultation office. Not an exam room, but a proper office with a desk and comfortable chairs and diplomas on the walls. Dr. Morrison stood when I entered, coming around the desk to shake my hand. She was in her early 50s, with warm brown eyes and dark hair starting to gray at the temples, and she radiated competence and compassion in equal measure. Claire, thank you for coming in. Please, sit down. Can Nancy get you some water? Tea? Water would be nice. Thank you. My throat felt dry, scratchy, like I'd been talking too much or not enough. Nancy brought me a bottle of water and then discreetly left, closing the door behind her. Dr. Morrison settled into the chair across from me, her posture open and attentive. She didn't pick up a pen or open my file. She just looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt seen for the first time in months. How are you doing, Claire? And I mean really, not the polite answer you give when people ask. The question cracked something open inside me. I've been better, I admitted, my voice coming out smaller than intended. I was worried when you canceled last week. Nancy said there was some kind of emergency? Dr. Morrison's tone was carefully neutral, giving me space to explain or not explain. My husband had other plans that day. He didn't think I needed to come in. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Dr. Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. And where is your husband now? On vacation in Napa Valley, with his mistress. I found an engagement ring he bought for her in his desk drawer. The bitterness finally leaked through, coloring my voice. The doctor closed her eyes briefly, like she was absorbing a blow. When she opened them, I saw anger there, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Claire, I'm going to speak to you as both your doctor and as someone who has known the Donovan family for many years. What you're describing is not acceptable. It's not acceptable for any husband, but especially not for a husband whose wife is facing a serious medical crisis. He doesn't believe I'm really sick, I said. He thinks I'm exaggerating, being dramatic. The pathology report doesn't lie. The imaging doesn't lie. You have invasive ductal carcinoma and you need treatment. Not next month, not when it's convenient for David, but now. Doctor. Morrison leaned forward, her intensity radiating across the space between us. Claire, I need you to hear me. This is your life we're talking about. Your cancer is treatable, highly treatable, but we cannot wait. Every week we delay increases the risk of metastasis. I know. I twisted the water bottle in my hands, feeling the plastic crinkle under my fingers. I know all of this. I've read everything you gave me. I understand the statistics, the treatment protocols, the prognosis. Then why are we postponing? Her voice was gentle but firm, the voice of someone who'd had difficult conversations with patients countless times before. I met her eyes, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I was completely honest. Because I need to decide if I want to fight to save a life that I'm not sure is worth saving anymore. If I start treatment, I'm committing to months of hell. I'll be sick, weak, dependent. And the person who should be taking care of me is planning to propose to another woman. So I need to figure out what comes next before I can commit to surviving. Dr. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, and I watched emotions play across her face. Sadness, anger, understanding, determination. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay, I hear you. But I need you to understand something, Claire. You don't fight to save the life you have now. You fight to save the life you're going to build once you get through this. You fight for your future, not your past. The words hit me like a physical impact, reverberating through my chest. My future. When had I stopped thinking about that? When had I started believing that my life was only valuable in relation to David, to our marriage, to the role I played as his wife? I'm scared, I whispered, and it was the truest thing I'd said in weeks. Of course you are. This is terrifying. Cancer is terrifying, and facing it without proper support is even more terrifying. But Claire, you're not alone. You have a medical team who cares about you. You have friends, family, and I'm going to tell you something in confidence. She paused, seeming to weigh her words. I've known David since he was a boy. I've watched him grow up, and I've seen the kind of man he's become. And I can tell you that the way he's treating you says everything about his character and nothing about your worth. You deserve better. You deserve to fight for yourself, for the woman you can be on the other side of this. Tears were running down my face now, hot and fast, and I didn't try to stop them. His father has an appointment with you today, doesn't he? Dr. Morrison's expression shifted, became more guarded. I can't discuss other patients with you, Claire. You know that. I'm not asking you to discuss anything. I'm just confirming that Jim Donovan is scheduled to see you for his annual physical. I kept my voice steady, watching her face. Why are you asking me this? Because I want you to understand something, Dr. Morrison. I'm going to start treatment. I'm going to fight. But not because I want to save my marriage, or because I'm hoping David will suddenly become the man I need him to be. I'm fighting because you're right. I deserve a future. And part of that future involves making sure that people understand the truth about what's happened here. Dr. Morrison studied me for a long moment, and I saw understanding dawn in her eyes. Claire, I have to maintain doctor-patient confidentiality with all of my patients. I know, and I would never ask you to violate that. I'm simply pointing out that Jim Donovan is going to ask you how his family is doing, the way he always does. He's going to assume everything is fine with David and me. And what you choose to say in response to those casual family questions, well, that's between you and your conscience. A small smile tugged at the corner of Dr. Morrison's mouth. You know, when Jim asks about family, he usually wants to talk about his son. He's very proud of David, always has been. Thinks he can do no wrong. Yes, I imagine that's true. I wiped my eyes, feeling steadier now, feeling like I'd taken back some small measure of control. Jim might be very surprised to learn that David has been less than supportive during your medical crisis. He might be shocked to know that his son missed his wife's chemotherapy appointment to go shopping with another woman. He might even be disappointed enough to ask some hard questions of his son. Dr. Morrison's voice was carefully neutral, but her eyes were sharp with intent. Yes, I agreed quietly. He might be all of those things. We sat in silence for a moment, an understanding passing between us that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Dr. Morrison would maintain her professional ethics. She wouldn't violate confidentiality. But she was also a human being with strong feelings about loyalty and family and the right way to treat people you'd promised to love. Let's schedule your treatment, Dr. Morrison said, shifting back into professional mode. We've already lost a week. I want to get you started as soon as possible. Can you do Thursday? I can squeeze you into the infusion center first thing in the morning." "Thursday works," I said, feeling the weight of the decision settle over me. It felt heavy and light at the same time, terrifying and liberating in equal measure. We spent the next hour going over everything again: the treatment schedule, the side effects, the support services available. Doctor Morrison gave me prescriptions for anti-nausea medications, steroids to take before infusion, creams for skin reactions. She explained what to expect in the first 24 hours, the first week, the first cycle. Nancy came back in and walked me through the infusion center procedures, gave me pamphlets about nutrition and managing fatigue, handed me a soft chemo cap with the kind of gentle sympathy that made my throat tight. "Do you have someone who can drive you on Thursday?" Nancy asked, and I saw her exchange a glance with Dr. Morrison. "My sister is coming down tomorrow night. She'll be with me." The words felt good to say, felt solid and real. I wasn't alone. I had people who loved me, who would show up when it mattered. "Good," Dr. Morrison said firmly. "That's very good. And Claire, I want you to call me if you need anything, day or night. My cell number is on the card Nancy is giving you. I mean it. Anything at all." I left the office feeling wrung out but strangely energized, like I'd crossed some invisible threshold and there was no going back now. The afternoon sun was bright and warm, and I stood in the parking lot for a moment, just breathing, feeling the air fill my lungs, feeling alive in a way I hadn't in weeks. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "How's it going? Miss you." I typed back, "Fine. Miss you too." 2 lies for the price of 1. When I got home, I called Jennifer to tell her about the Thursday appointment. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry. "How did it go? What did the doctor say?" "I'm starting treatment on Thursday. Can you still come down tomorrow?" "I'm already packing. I'll be there by 8 tomorrow night. Have you eaten? Are you taking care of yourself?" The rapid-fire questions were so typical of Jen, always moving, always doing, never sitting still with her emotions. "I'm fine. I promise. I just need you here. I'm coming, Claire. I'm coming, and we're going to get through this. Together." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I heard her sniff, trying to hide her tears. After we hung up, I made myself dinner and ate it methodically, forcing down food that tasted like cardboard. The house felt different now, less like a home and more like a set where I'd been playing a role for too long. I walked through the rooms, touching things, saying goodbye to the life I'd thought I had. The wedding photos on the mantle, David and I young and hopeful and convinced we'd beat the odds. The furniture we'd picked out together, compromising on styles and colors, building a home that was supposed to last forever. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, learning his favorite dishes, making his mother's recipes, trying to be the wife he wanted. That night I slept fitfully, my dreams full of hospitals and needles, and David's face looking at me with indifference. I woke up Wednesday morning gritty-eyed and exhausted, but there was no time to wallow. I had things to do, preparations to make. I cleaned the guest room for Jennifer, washing the sheets and fluffing the pillows, making sure she'd be comfortable. I went to the grocery store and bought easy foods, things that wouldn't make me nauseous, things I could manage even if I felt terrible. Crackers and ginger ale, bland soups, popsicles, applesauce. The woman at the checkout counter, someone I'd seen dozens of times over the years, smiled at me as she rang up my items. "Planning for a sick day?" she asked pleasantly, gesturing at my purchases. "Something like that," I said, and left it at that. I spent the afternoon organizing. I paid bills, made sure the house was in order, set up a space in the bedroom where I could rest comfortably. I put books on the nightstand, charged my iPad, made sure I had comfortable clothes that would be easy to change if I felt sick. The practical tasks kept my mind busy, kept me from thinking too hard about what was coming. At 6 o'clock, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up on the 4th ring. "Mrs. Donovan? This is Dr. James Donovan, David's father." My heart began to race, pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Oh, hello, Dr. Donovan. How are you?" "I'm well, thank you. Claire, I was hoping we could talk. Do you have a few minutes?" His voice was serious, stripped of its usual jovial warmth. "Of course." I sat down on the couch, my legs suddenly weak. I had my annual physical today with Dr. Morrison. She's been my physician for nearly 20 years, and we've become good friends in that time. We often chat about family, about how everyone's doing. He paused, and I heard him take a breath. "Claire, she mentioned something today that concerned me greatly. She said you're starting chemotherapy tomorrow for breast cancer. Is this true? The room seemed to tilt around me. Yes, it's true. And David knows about this diagnosis? His voice was tight with controlled emotion. Yes, he knows. He was at the initial consultation. I kept my voice neutral, not wanting to be the one to say it, to spell it out for his father. I see. And where is David right now, Claire? He's in Napa Valley, a work conference. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it wasn't my place to tell his father about Melissa. Not yet. The silence that followed was profound. I could hear Dr. Donovan breathing, could almost feel him processing this information, putting pieces together that he hadn't wanted to see. A work conference. The day before his wife starts cancer treatment. Yes. Claire, I need you to be honest with me. Is David being supportive through this? Is he taking care of you the way a husband should? The tears came then, sudden and overwhelming. I'd held it together through everything, through the diagnosis and the planning and the fear, but this unexpected kindness from David's father broke something loose inside me. No, I whispered. No, he's not. Tell me everything, Dr. Donovan said gently. Please, Claire. I need to understand what's happening. So I told him. Not everything. Not about Melissa or the ring, but about the canceled appointment, about David's dismissiveness of my diagnosis, about feeling abandoned and alone. The words poured out of me, and Dr. Donovan listened in silence, only occasionally making a soft sound of dismay or anger. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then Dr. Donovan's voice came through, thick with emotion. Claire, I'm so sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. Patricia and I had no idea. David told us you were fine, that you'd had some tests, but everything came back normal. He lied to us. He probably convinced himself it was true, I said, trying to be fair even though David deserved none of my fairness. He thinks I exaggerate medical issues. That's not for him to decide. You have cancer, Claire. You have a diagnosis from one of the best oncologists in the state. There's no exaggeration there, no room for interpretation. Dr. Donovan's voice was firm now, full of professional certainty. I'm coming over. Right now. I need to see you. To talk to you face to face. Dr. Donovan, you don't have to. I'm already getting my keys. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Claire? I'm going to call my son. This ends now. He hung up before I could respond, and I sat there on the couch, phone in hand, not quite believing what had just happened. Doctor. Morrison had done it. She'd found a way to tell the truth without violating confidentiality, had planted the seeds that led David's father to ask the right questions. And now the carefully constructed lies that David had built were about to come crashing down. I barely had time to wash my face and compose myself before the doorbell rang. Dr. Donovan stood on my porch, still in his work clothes, his face drawn with worry and anger. He was a tall man, had passed his height down to David, and he'd always intimidated me a little with his quiet authority. But now, standing in my doorway, he just looked like a father who was heartbroken by his son's failures. Claire, he said, and pulled me into a hug. I stood stiff in his embrace for a moment before melting into it, accepting this unexpected comfort from unexpected quarters. He smelled like the hospital, antiseptic and clean, mixed with his cologne that was so different from David's. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I'm so sorry. So very sorry. I let him in, and we sat in the living room where David and I had hosted Christmas dinners and birthday parties and anniversary celebrations. Dr. Donovan looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time, noticing things he'd missed before. The absence of recent photos, the dust on the mantel, the wilted flowers in the vase. How long has he been pulling away? He asked quietly. About 8 months, maybe longer. I didn't want to see it at first. I tucked my feet under me on the couch, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. And this diagnosis, when did you get it? 6 weeks ago. We started planning treatment immediately, but David kept finding reasons to postpone, to delay. He missed appointments, said he had to work. When I told him my chemotherapy was supposed to start last Thursday, he told me I was exaggerating and that he had other plans. Dr. Donovan's hands clenched into fists on his knees. Other plans. My God, Claire. My own son. I raised him better than this. Patricia and I, we taught him about commitment, about honor, about being there for the people you love. Where did we go wrong? You didn't go wrong, I said gently. Sometimes people just become who they are despite their upbringing, not because of it. He looked at me with something like gratitude, then shook his head. I'm calling him. Right now. He needs to come home immediately. Dr. Donovan, he won't come. He's with someone. The words came out before I could stop them. The silence was deafening. Dr. Donovan stared at me, his face going pale, then flushing red with fury. He's what? He's having an affair. With a woman from his company. I think he's planning to leave me. I found an engagement ring in his desk. Now that I'd started, I couldn't seem to stop. He took her on this trip, told me it was a work conference, but I saw it on his calendar. Napa Valley, 5 days, romantic wine country getaway. Dr. Donovan stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. His hands were shaking, and I watched him struggle to control his breathing. That selfish, stupid, cruel... He cut himself off, visibly working to calm down. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make this right. You can't fix this, I said, and I heard the acceptance in my own voice. This marriage is over. It's been over for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. But I need you to know that I'm okay. Or I will be okay. I have my sister coming tonight. I'm starting treatment tomorrow. I have a good medical team. I'm going to fight this cancer, and I'm going to survive. And I'm going to build a life that doesn't revolve around a man who doesn't love me anymore. Dr. Donovan turned from the window, and I saw respect in his eyes alongside the anger and sorrow. You're a remarkable woman, Claire. You always have been. David is a fool to lose you. Maybe. But maybe it's better this way. At least now I know the truth. At least now I can stop pretending. We talked for another hour. Dr. Donovan asking careful questions about my treatment plan, about my prognosis, about what I needed. He told me he'd be checking in regularly, that he'd make sure I had everything I needed, that Patricia would want to help once she knew. The thought of telling Patricia made my chest ache, but Dr. Donovan assured me he'd handle it, that I didn't need to worry about managing his wife's emotions on top of everything else. I'm still going to call David, he said as he was leaving. Tonight. I'm going to tell him exactly what I think of him, and I'm going to make sure he understands that he needs to come home and face what he's done. He won't come, I repeated. He's chosen his path. Then he'll live with the consequences, and so will she, whoever she is. Dr. Donovan hugged me again at the door, held me tight for a long moment. You're not alone, Claire. You have family. You'll always have family. After he left, I sat in the darkening living room and wondered what David would do when his father called. Would he be angry? Defensive? Would he spin some story? Try to make himself the victim? Or would he finally, show some remorse for what he'd done? My phone rang 20 minutes later. David. I let it ring 4 times before answering, my heart hammering in my chest. What the hell did you tell my father? His voice was sharp with anger, no greeting, no pretense of civility. I told him the truth, that I have cancer and I'm starting chemotherapy tomorrow. You told him I abandoned you. You made me sound like a monster. The outrage in his voice would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Did I lie? Are you not in Napa with Melissa right now instead of here with me? The silence was answer enough. Then, you went through my desk. I found the ring, David. I know you're planning to propose to her. So let's stop pretending this marriage means anything to you. Jesus Christ, Claire. I was going to tell you. After your treatment, when you were stable. I didn't want to stress you out while you were sick. The audacity of it took my breath away. How considerate of you. You were going to wait until I was pumped full of poison and losing my hair before you told me you're leaving me for another woman. That's very thoughtful, David. Very sensitive. Don't do that. Don't make me the bad guy here. You've been difficult for months. Always complaining, always sick with something. I can't do anything right according to you. I have cancer. The words ripped out of me, loud and raw. I have actual, real, documented cancer. Not anxiety, not stress, not exaggeration. Cancer. And instead of being there for me, you're fucking your girlfriend in wine country. I love her, he said. And those 3 words hurt more than anything else he could have said. Not because I wanted his love anymore, but because of the timing. Because of how little he seemed to care about destroying me while I was already being destroyed by disease. Then go ahead and love her. Propose to her. Build a life with her. But don't you dare contact me again unless it's through a lawyer. I want a divorce, David. I want you out of my life. Fine. That's just fine with me. You're impossible anyway. Always have been. He was yelling now, and I could hear Melissa in the background asking what was wrong. I'll have my lawyer contact you next week. You do that. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. I hung up before he could respond, before he could say anything else that would lodge in my brain and torment me later. I sat there in the dark, phone clutched in my hand, and waited for the tears to come. But they didn't. I felt empty, hollowed out, but also strangely free. The worst had happened. The confrontation I'd been dreading was over. David knew that I knew, and there was no more pretending, no more hoping things would magically get better. It was done. We were done. My phone rang again almost immediately. Jennifer. Claire, are you okay? I'm on the road. I left early. I'll be there in 2 hours. Just talk to me. Are you okay? I'm okay, I said, and meant it more than I expected to. I told David I want a divorce. Oh, thank God. I was worried you were going to try to work it out or some shit like that. Jen's voice was fierce with relief. He's trash, Claire. Complete trash. You're so much better off without him. I know. I think I've known for a while. We stayed on the phone for the next hour while she drove, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her job, about the guy she was dating, about Mom's latest drama with the neighbors. Normal, everyday things that reminded me there was a world outside my collapsing marriage, outside my cancer diagnosis, outside the nightmare of the past few weeks. When Jennifer finally arrived, bursting through the door with her overnight bag and a fierce hug that nearly knocked me over, I felt something inside me shift and settle. This was what love looked like. This was what showing up meant. Not promises and ring boxes, but a sister driving 3 hours on a work night because you needed her. I brought ice cream, she announced, heading straight for the kitchen. The good stuff, the kind with chocolate chunks and caramel swirl. We're going to eat ourselves sick and talk about what an asshole David is, and then tomorrow we're going to kick cancer's ass. I start chemo tomorrow, Jen. I'm going to be sick. Then we'll eat the ice cream tonight. Come on, Claire. One last indulgence before the hard part starts. She was already pulling out bowls, digging in the drawer for spoons, her energy filling up the kitchen in a way that made the house feel less empty. We ate ice cream and I told her everything. About Dr. Morrison, about David's father calling, about the fight with David. She listened with appropriate outrage, cursing David creatively and promising various forms of revenge that made me laugh despite everything. It felt good to laugh, felt like something I'd forgotten how to do. You know what's going to happen, right? Jen said, scraping the last of her ice cream from the bowl. David's going to realize he fucked up. He's going to try to come back, especially after his parents get done with him. Men like David, they don't handle public consequences well. Once everyone knows what he did, once his family and friends find out he abandoned his wife during cancer treatment to run off with his mistress, he's going to panic. I don't care. He can panic all he wants. I'm done. Good. Because you deserve so much better. You deserve someone who shows up, someone who holds your hand during the scary stuff, someone who loves you enough to be there even when it's hard. Jen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I love you, Claire. And I'm going to be here for all of it. Every appointment, every treatment, every bad day. You're not doing this alone. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, with my sister in the room down the hall and the knowledge that tomorrow, I'd finally start fighting for my life. Not for David, not for my marriage, not for any reason except that I wanted to live. I wanted to see what came next. I wanted to find out who I could be on the other side of this nightmare. Thursday morning dawned gray and cool, the marine layer blocking out the sun and coating everything in soft mist. Jennifer was already up when I emerged from my bedroom, had coffee made and toast ready, was bustling around like she'd lived there for years instead of hours. Ready? She asked, her eyes searching my face. As ready as I'll ever be. The drive to the infusion center was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Jennifer kept glancing at me like she was afraid I'd disappear, and I kept my eyes on the road, on the familiar streets that looked different somehow in the morning fog. We passed the coffee shop, the park, the grocery store, all the landmarks of my ordinary life that I'd taken for granted. The infusion center was on the ground floor of the medical building, a warm and welcoming space that didn't feel as clinical as I'd expected. Soft lighting, comfortable recliners, warm blankets folded on every chair. Nancy met us at the door, her smile genuine and warm as she guided us to a chair by the window. "This is your spot for today," she said, helping me settle into the recliner that was surprisingly comfortable. "We'll get you all set up, start with some pre-meds, and then we'll begin the infusion. The whole thing will take about 3 to 4 hours. Do you have everything you need? Books, iPad, snacks?" "I think so." My hands were shaking as I set my bag down, and Jennifer immediately grabbed one, squeezing tight. "I'm right here," she said, "not going anywhere." Dr. Morrison came by before they started the IV, checking in with that careful attention that made me feel like I mattered. "How are you feeling? Any questions before we begin?" "I'm scared." I admitted. That's normal. That's completely understandable. But Claire, you're doing the right thing. This is the first step toward being cancer-free. You're fighting back. She squeezed my shoulder, and I saw the determination in her eyes. You've got this. The nurse started the IV with practiced efficiency, and I watched the clear liquid begin to drip through the tube. This was it. The poison that would hopefully save my life, that would kill the cancer cells trying to kill me. My future flowing into my veins one drop at a time. Jennifer held my hand through all of it, kept up a stream of conversation that required minimal response, told me stories and jokes and gossipy details about people I'd never met. Other patients came and went around us, some with family members, some alone, all of us connected by this strange shared experience of choosing poison to stay alive. The first week after chemotherapy was exactly as awful as they'd warned me it would be. The nausea hit on Friday afternoon, a rolling wave that made the whole world tilt and spin. I spent 2 days barely able to keep down water, Jennifer holding my hair back when I threw up, pressing cool washcloths to my forehead, murmuring reassurances that felt like lifelines in the dark. The fatigue was worse than the nausea somehow, a bone-deep exhaustion that made lifting my head from the pillow feel like climbing a mountain. Every cell in my body screamed for rest, for oblivion, for this to be over. But Jennifer was there. Every minute of those first terrible days, she was there. She learned which foods I could tolerate, discovered that ginger tea helped more than the prescription anti-nausea medication, figured out that cold things were easier to swallow than warm. She turned the guest room into her permanent residence, told her boss she was taking family leave, and settled in for the long haul like she'd never planned anything else. David called twice during that first week. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that Jennifer listened to and then deleted without telling me what he'd said. "Nothing you need to hear right now," was all she'd say, her face tight with anger. By the second week, I felt marginally more human. The nausea had subsided to a manageable queasiness, and I could eat small amounts of bland food without immediately regretting it. My hair hadn't fallen out yet, but Nancy had warned me it would start soon, probably around day 14 or 15. I found myself touching it constantly, running my fingers through the strands, mourning it in advance. Dr. Donovan called every other day, checking in with professional concern and fatherly worry. He'd told Patricia everything, and she'd called me crying, apologizing over and over for her son's behavior, begging me to let her help. I'd agreed to let her visit, and she came bearing homemade soup and fresh flowers and an envelope that she pressed into my hands with trembling fingers. "This is from Jim and me," she said, her eyes red from crying. "For your medical expenses. For whatever you need. We can't fix what David did, but we can at least do this." Inside was a check for $50,000. I stared at it, my vision blurring with tears. "Patricia, I can't. You can, and you will. You're still our daughter, Claire. No matter what David does, you're still family to us. Please let us help you." I'd accepted it because I needed it, because medical bills were already piling up and my insurance only covered so much, because pride was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. We'd cried together in my living room, two women mourning different losses but finding comfort in shared grief. David came home on Thursday of that second week, 10 days after he was supposed to return. I knew because Jennifer told me she'd seen his car in the driveway, watched him let himself in with his key, heard him moving around in the house he apparently still thought of as his. She'd gone out there like an avenging angel, told me later that she'd physically blocked the doorway when he tried to come up to the bedroom where I was resting. "You don't get to see her?" Jennifer had said, her voice cold enough to freeze blood. "You don't get to walk in here like nothing happened and expect her to what? Forgive you? Welcome you home? This is my house. She's my wife. Get out of my way." David's voice had been sharp with entitlement, with the assumption that he still had rights here. "Actually, she's your soon-to-be ex-wife, and unless you want me to call the police, you're going to turn around and leave. Claire doesn't want to see you. She doesn't want to talk to you. She wants you to have your lawyer contact her lawyer, and that's it." I'd heard all of this from my bed, too weak to get up but strong enough to feel a fierce pride in my sister. There had been more arguing, David's voice rising with frustration, Jennifer's staying steady and firm. Eventually, I'd heard the front door slam, heard his car start and drive away, heard Jennifer come upstairs to check on me with fury still radiating from every pore. "I wanted to punch him," she'd said. "I wanted to punch him so badly my knuckles hurt. I love you," I'd told her, and meant it with everything I had. 3 weeks after my first treatment, my hair started falling out. Not dramatically like in the movies, but gradually, filling the drain when I showered, coming out in clumps when I brushed it, leaving strands on my pillow every morning. I'd known it was coming, had prepared myself mentally, but the reality still hit hard. One morning, I woke up and looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Pale, thin, with patchy hair that made me look sick in a way the actual cancer never had. "Let's just shave it," Jennifer said, appearing in the bathroom doorway with clippers she'd bought the day before. "Waiting for it to fall out is torture. Let's take control of it." So we did. She sat me down in the kitchen and shaved my head, both of us crying as my hair fell to the floor in soft piles. When it was done, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a stranger, a woman with no hair, with dark circles under her eyes, with a port visible under the skin of her chest. A woman who was fighting for her life and wearing all the evidence on her body. "You're beautiful," Jennifer said fiercely, standing behind me with her hands on my bare shoulders. "You're so fucking beautiful and brave and strong. Don't you forget it." I bought scarves and hats and wore them constantly at first, unable to look at my reflection without flinching. But gradually I got used to it. The baldness became part of my reality, along with the fatigue and the nausea and the way food all tasted like metal. This was my life now. This was what fighting looked like. My second chemotherapy treatment came 3 weeks after the first, and it was easier having been through it once before. I knew what to expect, knew how to manage the side effects, knew that the worst would pass, and I'd have a few days where I felt almost normal before the cycle started again. Dr. Saida Morrison examined me beforehand, pleased with my labs, encouraged by my progress. The tumor was shrinking. The poison was working. "You're doing great, Claire," she said, and I heard the pride in her voice. "Really great. I know this is hell, but you're handling it beautifully." During those weeks, I didn't hear from David at all. His lawyer had contacted the attorney I'd hired, a fierce woman named Maria Santos who specialized in divorce cases and seemed to take personal offense at David's behavior. We were fighting over everything: the house, the savings, the retirement accounts. David wanted to play hardball, wanted to claim I was being unreasonable, wanted to paint himself as the victim of a vindictive ex-wife. Maria was having none of it. "He abandoned you during cancer treatment," she'd said during our first meeting, her dark eyes flashing with anger. "He was having an affair. He lied to you and to his family. No judge in the state is going to look kindly on that. We're going to take him for everything he's worth, and he's going to deserve every penny of it." It was week 7, between my 3rd and 4th chemotherapy sessions, when everything came to a head. I was having a good day, relatively speaking. The nausea had subsided, my energy was marginally better, and Jennifer had convinced me to take a short walk around the neighborhood. We were just getting back, laughing about something ridiculous she'd said, when we saw his car in the driveway. Not David's car, Dr. Donovan's. He was sitting on the front porch, still in his white coat from the hospital, his face grave. My heart began to pound, that familiar anxiety spike that came with unexpected visits. Had something happened to Patricia? Was there news about my treatment? "Dr. Donovan," I said as we approached, "is everything okay?" He stood and I saw he was holding something, an envelope. His hands were shaking slightly as he extended it toward me. "Claire, I need to talk to you. May I come in?" We settled in the living room, the 3 of us, and Dr. Donovan sat with the envelope in his lap, looking at it like it might bite him. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, dust motes dancing in the beams, and somewhere a dog was barking. Normal sounds from a normal day that was about to become anything but normal. "I saw David today," Dr. Donovan said finally, his voice heavy. "He came to my office, demanded to see me, made a scene in the waiting room until I agreed to talk to him." My stomach dropped. What did he want? He wanted me to talk to you, to convince you to stop the divorce proceedings, to give him another chance. He had this whole speech prepared about how he'd made a mistake, how he still loves you, how you're being unreasonable and vindictive. Dr. Donovan's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. He actually had the audacity to tell me that you're punishing him for being honest about his feelings, that you're using the cancer to manipulate him into staying. Jennifer made a sound of pure rage beside me. I just felt cold, numb, like all my emotions had been locked away somewhere safe where David couldn't touch them. "What did you say?" I asked quietly. "I told him he was delusional. I told him he'd destroyed his marriage through his own selfish choices, and that he was going to have to live with the consequences." Dr. Donovan looked at me, and I saw pain in his eyes. And then I told him something else. Something I probably shouldn't have told him. Something that violated doctor-patient confidentiality in a way that could cost me my license. The room went very still. Even the dog outside had stopped barking. "What did you tell him?" Dr. Donovan opened the envelope and pulled out papers, medical records, lab results. I saw letterhead from his practice, saw David's name at the top, saw numbers and codes that meant nothing to me. David came in for his annual physical 6 weeks ago. You remember the same day you came to see Dr. Morrison? I remember. We ran standard blood work, a complete metabolic panel, lipid panel, CBC, all the usual screening tests we do on a 45-year-old man. Most of it came back normal. He paused, his jaw working like he was trying to force out words that didn't want to come. But his PSA was elevated, significantly elevated. I knew that acronym, prostate-specific antigen, a marker for potential prostate problems including cancer. How elevated? High enough that I immediately ordered additional testing, a prostate biopsy, additional imaging. I called David multiple times to follow up, to get him scheduled, to make sure he understood the urgency. Dr. Donovan's voice was shaking now. He ignored every single call, didn't return my messages, didn't schedule the follow-up appointments. He was too busy, he said when I finally got him on the phone last week. Too much going on at work. He'd get to it eventually. Oh my God, Jennifer breathed beside me. So today, when he came to my office with his sob story about wanting his wife back, I told him I had news for him too. I told him I'd finally gotten the biopsy results back from the lab. Dr. Donovan looked down at the papers in his hands. Prostate cancer. Gleason score of 8. Aggressive. The kind that doesn't wait around for you to get your life in order before it spreads. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. David had cancer. David, who had dismissed my diagnosis, who had called me dramatic, who had abandoned me to go on vacation with his mistress. David had cancer. Did you tell him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I told him, right there in my office, with my staff trying not to listen through the door. I told him he has aggressive prostate cancer and he needs to start treatment immediately, that every week he's delayed has made his prognosis worse, that he might have caught it early enough if he'd bothered to follow up when I first called him, but now we're looking at advanced disease. Dr. Donovan's hands were clenched into fists around the papers. And do you know what he said? I shook my head, unable to speak. He said, "But I feel fine. You must be wrong. I'd know if I had cancer." The exact same dismissal he gave you. The exact same arrogance and denial. Dr. Donovan laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. I told him that his wife knew she had cancer because she trusted her doctors and took her diagnosis seriously. I told him that she was fighting for her life while he was fucking around with his mistress. And I told him that if he wanted any chance of surviving this, he needed to get his head out of his ass and start listening to people who actually know what they're talking about. The silence that followed was immense, filling every corner of the room. I tried to process what I was hearing, tried to feel something other than this strange detachment. David had cancer. David needed treatment. David was facing exactly what I was facing, except he'd brought it on himself by ignoring the warnings, by being too arrogant to believe anything bad could happen to him. What's his prognosis? I asked, because some part of me still cared, still remembered the man I'd once loved enough to promise forever. With immediate aggressive treatment, decent. Not great, but decent. Surgery, radiation, possibly hormone therapy depending on staging scans. But if he continues to delay, if he doesn't take this seriously, then we're looking at metastatic disease within months. Bone metastases, lymph node involvement, all the worst-case scenarios. Dr. Donovan rubbed his face with both hands. I'm telling you this because he's still legally your husband, because you have a right to know. And because he's going to try to use this to manipulate you, to make you feel guilty, to convince you to take him back. I won't, I said, and was surprised by the certainty in my voice. He made his choices. He has to live with them. Good. That's good, Claire. Because this doesn't change anything he did to you. This doesn't erase the abandonment, the affair, the cruelty. He doesn't get to be forgiven just because he's sick now, too. Jennifer was very quiet beside me, and when I looked at her, I saw tears streaming down her face. That's karma, she said softly. That's actual fucking karma. Dr. Donovan stood to leave, setting the papers on the coffee table. Those are copies of his test results. In case you need them for the divorce proceedings. In case his lawyer tries to claim he's too sick to deal with legal matters. I shouldn't have given them to you, but I don't care anymore. I'm tired of watching him destroy people and get away with it. I walked him to the door, this man who had shown me more kindness in the past weeks than his son had in years. Thank you, I said, for telling me, for being honest. Claire, I need you to understand something. He turned to face me, his eyes intense. My son is sick. He needs treatment, but he also needs to face the consequences of his actions. Don't let anyone tell you that you owe him your time, your energy, your forgiveness because he has cancer. You don't. You owe him nothing. After he left, Jennifer and I sat on the couch for a long time, not speaking, just existing in the strange new reality where David was sick too, where he would finally understand what I'd been going through, where the universe had delivered a justice that felt both perfect and terrible. "What are you going to do?" Jennifer asked eventually. "Nothing," I said. "I'm going to do exactly what I've been doing. I'm going to finish my treatment. I'm going to get divorced. I'm going to survive. What he does with his diagnosis is his problem, not mine. He's going to call you. You know that, right? He's going to want sympathy, support. He's going to expect you to be there for him. Then he's going to be disappointed." I pulled the soft cap I was wearing lower over my bare head, feeling the scratch of fabric against sensitive skin. I learned something these past few months, Jen. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I learned that I can survive things I didn't think I could survive. And I learned that the only person I can really count on to show up for me is me. "And me," Jennifer said fiercely. "You can count on me." "And you," I agreed, smiling despite everything. David called that evening. I watched my phone ring, watched his name flash on the screen, and didn't answer. He called 4 more times that night, left voicemails that I deleted without listening to. The next morning, he sent a text. "Claire, please. I need to talk to you. I'm sick. I have cancer. I need you." I typed back, "I know. Your father told me. I'm sorry you're going through this. But it doesn't change anything between us. Please have your lawyer contact my lawyer for all future communications." His response came immediately. "Are you serious? I have cancer, Claire. I'm your husband. How can you be so cold?" The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I showed the text to Jennifer, who snorted with derision. "Oh, now he remembers he's your husband. Now he remembers that marriage means being there for each other." I didn't respond to that text or any of the dozen that followed. I blocked his number eventually, tired of the manipulation, tired of the guilt trips, tired of him expecting me to set myself on fire to keep him warm. He'd made his choices. He'd chosen Melissa over me, had chosen his affair over his marriage, had chosen his own convenience over my life-threatening illness. Now he was sick too, and that was terrible. Genuinely terrible. But it wasn't my responsibility to fix. My 4th chemotherapy treatment came and went, then my 5th. The tumor continued to shrink. Dr. Morrison continued to be pleased with my progress. My hair stayed gone, but I'd gotten used to it, had even started going out without covering my head sometimes, owning my baldness like battle armor. The fatigue was constant, but manageable. The nausea was predictable. I'd learned to read my body's signals, to know when to rest and when to push through. Jennifer had gone back to work but came down every weekend, and Patricia visited twice a week, bringing food and books and movies and her steady, comforting presence. Dr. Donovan kept me updated on David's treatment despite my insistence that I didn't want to know. David had started radiation therapy, was scheduled for surgery. He was living with Melissa now, had moved in with her after I'd changed the locks on the house. Apparently, the reality of his diagnosis had put some strain on that relationship. Melissa hadn't signed up for a sick boyfriend, hadn't bargained on chemotherapy and radiation, and all the unsexy parts of being seriously ill. "She's pulling away," Dr. Donovan had said during one visit, his tone suggesting he found a certain satisfaction in that fact. David's realizing that the woman he left you for isn't actually interested in the for better or worse part of a relationship. I'd felt nothing hearing that. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a vague sense that it was all very predictable. People who cheated rarely found lasting happiness with the affair partner. The relationship built on betrayal usually crumbled under pressure. It was basic psychology, basic human nature. It was week 18 after my final chemotherapy treatment that the divorce was finalized. Maria had fought hard, had documented every moment of David's abandonment, had presented evidence of his affair and his financial misconduct in hiding money to prepare for leaving me. The judge had not been sympathetic to David's claims that his illness should entitle him to leniency. In the end, I got the house, half the retirement accounts, and a settlement that would cover my medical expenses with plenty left over. David got Melissa and his cancer and the knowledge that he'd destroyed his life for temporary pleasure. I celebrated by having dinner with Jennifer and Patricia and Dr. Donovan at that Italian restaurant David had promised to take me to. We toasted to new beginnings, to survival, to the future that was spreading out before me like an unexplored country. I wore a wig for the occasion, my first since shaving my head, a short, stylish cut that made me look sophisticated and put together. Patricia cried and told me I looked beautiful. Dr. Donovan squeezed my hand and told me how proud he was of me. Jennifer just grinned and ordered the most expensive wine on the menu. 6 months after my diagnosis, Dr. Morrison did a full set of scans. I lay in the MRI machine, listening to the rhythmic banging and whirring, trying not to think about what they might find. The cancer could be gone. The cancer could have spread. Schrodinger's cat, except the cat was my future, and I wouldn't know if it was dead or alive until someone opened the box and looked. Dr. Morrison called me into her office 2 days later, and I brought Jennifer with me because I needed someone to hear the results, needed a witness to whatever news was coming. We sat in the same chairs where I'd sat months ago, terrified and alone, and waited for Dr. Morrison to tell us my fate. "Claire," she said, and her face broke into a wide smile. "The scans are clear. No evidence of disease. The tumor is gone. You're cancer-free." The room seemed to spin, and I heard Jennifer make a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Are you sure?" I asked, because it seemed impossible, because I'd spent so many months convinced I was going to die that living felt foreign. "I'm sure. You responded beautifully to treatment. The chemotherapy did exactly what we hoped it would do. We'll still need to move forward with surgery to remove any remaining tissue, and you'll have radiation and hormone therapy after that. But Claire, you beat this. You survived." I started crying. Ugly tears that came from somewhere deep and primal, and Jennifer was crying too, and even Dr. Morrison's eyes were wet. We'd done it. I'd done it. I'd fought the cancer and won. I'd survived David's betrayal and won. I'd made it through the worst period of my life and come out the other side scarred, but standing. "Thank you," I told Dr. Morrison, inadequate words for the woman who'd saved my life, who'd cared about me as a person and not just a patient, who'd made sure David's father knew the truth. "Thank you for everything. You did the hard part, Claire. You showed up. You did the work. I'm so proud of you." The surgery came 2 weeks later, a lumpectomy that removed what remained of the tumor and some surrounding tissue. The recovery was easier than chemotherapy had been, just pain and discomfort rather than the systemic misery of poison coursing through my veins. Radiation followed, daily treatments that left me exhausted but were nothing compared to what I'd already been through. And through it all, I healed. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. I healed from the cancer and from the marriage, from the betrayal, and from the fear. My hair started growing back, soft and downy at first, then thicker and curlier than it had been before. Patricia said it made me look like a pixie, ethereal and otherworldly. Jennifer said it made me look like a badass. I thought it made me look like someone who'd been through hell and lived to tell about it. I heard about David through the family grapevine. His surgery had been successful, but complications had arisen. The cancer had been more advanced than they'd hoped. He was dealing with side effects, with changes to his body and his life that were permanent and difficult. Melissa had left him 3 months into his treatment, unable to handle the reality of being with a sick partner. David was living alone now, dealing with his illness the way I'd dealt with mine, except where I'd had Jennifer and Patricia and Dr. Morrison and a team of people who cared about my survival. David had his parents and an ex-wife who'd sent a polite sympathy card and nothing else. I knew I should feel something about his situation. Sympathy, maybe. Vindication, possibly. But mostly, I felt nothing. He was part of my past now. A chapter that had closed. A lesson learned about the importance of choosing partners who showed up when it mattered. I wished him no harm, but I also wished him no particular good. He was simply someone I used to know. Someone who'd taught me what I would and wouldn't accept in my life going forward. 1 year after my diagnosis, I went back to work at the library. My coworkers threw me a party. A proper celebration this time. Not a goodbye, but a welcome back. They'd followed my journey through social media posts that I'd started sharing. Raw and honest accounts of treatment and recovery that had resonated with more people than I'd expected. I'd built a small online community of survivors and fighters, people going through their own battles who found comfort in knowing they weren't alone. The library felt like home in a way my house never quite had. Surrounded by books and quiet conversation, helping people find the stories they needed, I felt purposeful and grounded. I'd started volunteering with a cancer support group too, sharing my experience with newly diagnosed patients, offering the kind of support I'd wished I'd had at the beginning. Some people listened and took my advice. Some dismissed me the way David had dismissed his own diagnosis. I tried to help them all, but I'd learned I couldn't save everyone. Some people were determined to destroy themselves, and there was nothing you could do but step back and let them. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 14 months after my diagnosis, when I saw him. I was shelving books in the biography section, humming along to the soft music playing through the library speakers, when I looked up and saw David standing at the end of the aisle. He looked terrible, thin, gray-skinned, older than his years. He was using a cane, leaning heavily on it, and I saw the cancer had taken its toll on him in ways that made my heart ache despite everything. "Claire," he said, and his voice was rough, uncertain. "I was hoping I'd find you here." I set down the book I was holding, my hands suddenly unsteady. "David, how are you?" "I've been better." He attempted a smile that didn't quite work. "You look good, really good. Your hair is growing back." "Thank you." I touched the short curls self-consciously. "I'm doing well. Treatment's complete, just on hormone therapy now." "That's good. That's really good." He shifted his weight, wincing slightly. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" Every instinct told me to say no, to protect myself from whatever this was. But curiosity won out, and I nodded toward the small study rooms at the back of the library. We settled into one of them, the door open because I wasn't going to be alone in a closed space with him, and sat across from each other at the small table. "I'm sorry," David said, the words tumbling out before I could speak. "I'm so sorry, Claire, for everything. For not believing you, for abandoning you, for being the worst possible husband when you needed me most. I'm sorry." I'd imagined this moment dozens of times during my treatment, imagined what I'd say if David ever apologized, how I'd respond, whether I'd find it satisfying or hollow. Now that it was happening, I felt only tired. "Okay, thank you for saying that. I was a coward. I was selfish and stupid, and I convinced myself that you were the problem, that you were being dramatic and difficult, because it was easier than admitting I'd fallen out of love with our life together." He was crying now, tears running down his gaunt face. "And then I got sick and I understood. God, I understood everything. What you'd been trying to tell me, what you'd needed from me. And by then, it was too late." "Yes," I agreed gently. "It was too late. Melissa left me. I don't know if you heard." "I heard. She couldn't handle it. Me being sick. She said it wasn't what she signed up for." His laugh was bitter and broken. "The irony isn't lost on me. Trust me. I abandoned you for being sick, and she abandoned me for the same reason. Karma's a bitch. That's what Jennifer said." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Finally, David spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I needed to tell you that I know now. I know what I put you through. I know what I threw away. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at this man I'd once loved, this broken version of the person I'd built a life with, and felt a strange combination of pity and peace. "I do forgive you, David. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of carrying the anger around. It's too heavy, and I don't want to drag it through the rest of my life." "Thank you," he said, and the relief on his face was almost painful to witness. "That means more than you know. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean we're friends or that I want you in my life. It just means I'm letting go of the resentment so I can move forward." He nodded, accepting this with a grace I hadn't expected from him. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm ashamed of what I did, and that you were right to leave me, to divorce me. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." "Yes," I said simply. "I did." We talked for a few more minutes. Stilted conversation about his treatment and prognosis, about his relationship with his parents, about the life he was trying to rebuild. Then he stood, leaning heavily on his cane, and made his way to the door. "Claire," he said, turning back one last time. "I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you're healthy. You deserve every good thing." "So do you," I said, and meant it. "I hope your treatment goes well. I hope you beat this." "Thanks. Me too." I watched him walk away, this ghost of my former life, and felt the final threads of connection between us dissolve. He was just another cancer patient now, just another person fighting to survive, and I wished him well the way I'd wish any stranger well. But he wasn't my responsibility anymore. He wasn't my problem to solve or my cross to bear. That evening, I had dinner with a man named Marcus who I'd met at the cancer support group. He was a survivor too, 3 years cancer-free from lymphoma, and we'd been circling each other for weeks with careful interest. Nothing serious yet, Just coffee and conversation, but there was potential there. Possibility. He made me laugh. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He showed up when he said he would. These seemed like low bars, but I'd learned that reliability was its own form of love. We ate Thai food and talked about everything and nothing. And when he walked me to my car, he kissed me gently, asking permission first with his eyes. It was my first kiss since David, my first step into this new chapter of my life, where I was single and bald and scarred, and somehow more myself than I'd ever been before. "I'd like to see you again," Marcus said, his hand warm around mine. "I'd like that too," I said, and felt the truth of it settle in my chest, warm and hopeful. 2 years after my diagnosis, I stood in Dr. Morrison's office for what she called my graduation appointment. All my scans were clear. My labs were perfect. I was officially in remission, released from the intense monitoring of active treatment into the more relaxed schedule of survivorship. We took a photo together, Dr. Morrison and me, both of us grinning like idiots. She posted it on the practice's Instagram with the caption, "Another warrior beats cancer." I shared it everywhere, proud of what I'd accomplished, proud of the life I'd clawed back from the edge of loss. That evening, I hosted a dinner party at my house, the house that was fully mine now, redecorated to my taste without any input from David or ghosts of our former life. Jennifer came down from Sacramento with her new fiancé. Patricia and Dr. Donovan were there, bringing wine and Patricia's famous chicken piccata. Marcus came too, now officially my boyfriend, solid and steady and exactly what I needed. My mother flew in from Arizona, healthy enough to travel for the first time in years. My coworkers from the library, my friends from the support group, everyone who'd held me up when I couldn't hold myself. We gathered around my dining room table, this collection of people who'd become my chosen family, and I looked at each face and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what survival looked like. Not just beating the cancer, but building a life worth surviving for. Finding joy in small moments and big celebrations, surrounding myself with people who showed up, who loved fiercely, who understood that being there mattered more than being perfect. "I want to make a toast," Patricia said, standing with her wine glass raised. "To Claire, who showed all of us what strength looks like, who faced the worst and came through it with grace and dignity, who taught us that sometimes the end of one thing is just the beginning of something better." "To Claire," everyone echoed, and I felt tears prick my eyes for the 1,000th time since this all began. "To surviving," I said, raising my own glass. "To second chances. To finding out who you really are when everything else falls away. And to knowing that you're strong enough to handle whatever comes next." We drank and ate and laughed. And later, when everyone had gone home except Marcus and Jennifer, we sat on the back porch watching the stars come out. The air smelled like jasmine and possibility, and I felt more at peace than I had in years, maybe ever. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if David had believed you?" Jennifer asked softly. "If he'd been there for you from the beginning?" I considered this, turning the question over in my mind. Sometimes, but honestly, I think things happened exactly how they needed to. If David had stayed, I would have stayed too. I would have stayed in a marriage that was making me miserable, with a man who didn't really love me, out of obligation and fear of being alone. The cancer and the divorce forced me to face myself, to figure out who I was without him. And I like who I found. "You're kind of a badass," Marcus said, kissing the top of my head. "I really am," I agreed, and we all laughed. I heard later, through Patricia, that David's cancer had come back. The radiation hadn't gotten everything, and he was facing more treatment, a longer fight, uncertain outcomes. Part of me, the part that had loved him once, felt sad about that. But the larger part, the part that had survived and thrived, felt only a distant sympathy, the kind you'd feel for any stranger facing hardship. I sent him a card through his parents, wishing him strength and healing, and left it at that. 5 years after my diagnosis, I got a tattoo. A phoenix rising from flames, colorful and bold, placed over the scar where my port had been. The tattoo artist was gentle with the sensitive skin, taking breaks when I needed them, creating something beautiful from something painful. When it was finished, I looked at it in the mirror and felt complete in a way I'd been searching for. The phoenix was me, rising from the ashes of my old life, reborn through fire and struggle into something stronger, fiercer, more authentically myself. The cancer had tried to destroy me. David's betrayal had tried to break me. But I'd survived both, had taken the worst that life could throw at me and transformed it into something meaningful. I built a life I loved. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see. I wrote a book about my experience that helped other cancer patients navigate their own journeys. I married Marcus in a small ceremony in Patricia's garden, surrounded by the people who mattered most. We bought a house together, adopted 2 rescue dogs, talked about the future with cautious optimism. I learned to be happy in ways I'd never been before. Happy in my own skin, happy in my choices, happy in the knowledge that I could survive anything. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when Marcus was working late and the dogs were asleep at my feet, I'd think about that day when David canceled my chemotherapy appointment. That moment that had felt like the end of everything but had actually been the beginning. That point where my life split into before and after, old Claire and new Claire, the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. I'd think about Dr. Morrison, carefully planting the truth in Dr. Donovan's mind, knowing it would cascade into consequences for David. I'd think about that moment when David had learned he had cancer, when he'd been forced to face his own mortality and understand what he'd put me through. The universe had delivered its own justice, swift and brutal and perfectly calibrated to teach the lesson David had refused to learn any other way. And I'd think about the woman I'd become through all of it. Stronger, yes. Wiser, certainly. But also softer in some ways, more open to love and connection, more willing to be vulnerable with the right people. I'd learned that survival wasn't just about living through the worst moments. It was about choosing what came next, about building something beautiful from the rubble, about refusing to let trauma define you even as you acknowledged it shaped you. The cancer had tried to kill me. The betrayal had tried to break me. But I'd turned both into fuel for transformation, into motivation for becoming the person I was always meant to be. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all. Not David's suffering, though I knew some small part of me found satisfaction in the justice of it, but my thriving, my joy, my absolute refusal to let his failure determine my future. I survived. Not just the cancer, but everything that came with it. And in surviving, I learned to truly live. That was the real story, the one that mattered. Not the man who left me, not the disease that tried to take me, but the woman who refused to let either define her ending. I wrote my own conclusion, and it was beautiful.